First of all, thank you everyone for joining and a very warm welcome and good morning. This is Kanna here, and today I have the pleasure to invite you all for this session on water ecology and uh, fish culture, um, or enhancement of fish culture and production, applying ecological principles. So I'm assuming all of us have watched the videos that were shared with us by Madhukar Swayambhuji, who is with us today. He's also the resource person. But before I go and introduce Mr. Madhukar Swayambhuji, I would like to just give an overview of what today's session is all about. We have these sessions planned for 2 days, today and tomorrow. It's more like an interaction session and more like a seminar rather than one-way interaction or talk. And the first day of the seminar, would be about understanding water as an important element of nature and as an essential as an essential component of sustaining the evolution as well as sustaining life, and also about the two schools of thought, the Western and the ancient Indian, and how water is understood and investigated, studied in these two schools of thought and discourse. And apart from that, the seminar session would also discuss about uh, how the development sector understands water, and how the understanding of water in a certain way has led to either success or failure of many development or economic development interventions that are taken up by the government as well as many of the civil society organizations like us. And the session would also deal about the disconnection in understanding uh, the water and its relationship with soil, air, and the connection between the groundwater as well as the surface water, and how we fail to understand these relationships, or at least there is no cross-fertilization of understanding of water from people who know water ecology, people who see it from the um, chemical or physical aspects of it, and then how that doesn't percolate into the development sector, and how that leads to the failure. So this is something that we have planned for discussion, and I hope every one of us who are here uh, have jotted down their questions or queries that we would like to discuss with Mr. Swayambhuji here. So before I go further, I would take the pleasure to introduce Mr. Madhukar Swayambhuji, a very prominent person in water ecology and a very well-known author around the world. So he's a very big person, and it's our pleasure to have him here. So Madhukarji is now associated with CFM, which is a community friendly movement, which is an organization based out of Delhi. He was an IT professional by education and by profession, but I don't know, for some very good and unknown reason, he took up uh, he developed interest in water and water ecology, and his contribution towards this sector has been widely acclaimed and recognized, and he was awarded as Water Hero by Jal Shakti Mantralaya of India. And apart from that, he is a well-renowned and recognized top 3 global authors by Smart Water Magazine of Spain. and he is also a co-founder of Vedix Region, and he is a board member of CFM, and he is a founder and he is an expert in economics technology of ecological restoration of water bodies. So this is very little that I know and very little that I can introduce about Madhukarji here, and it's a pleasure to have him with us and among us, and uh, I would uh, I would take this pleasure to invite Madhukarji uh, to interact with colleagues. Very welcome, Madhukarji. We have our colleagues here um, who are uh, who are glad to be with you here and discuss with you about water ecology and uh, ecosystem restoration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kanna. You have given a lot of, I would say, extrapolated facts about me. I mean, I'm not a very big person or anything of that sort. I mean, yes, I have been into the IT industry. My focus or my expertise was into communication networking. I've worked with almost all the multinational equipment manufacturers in the country in my 25 years of uh, IT portfolio. And 2011, we started doing a research on the Indian science. Fortunately, I could understand Sanskrit, and that is how I started exploring the science into our scriptures. So I started from Vedas, and then I went to Upanishad and Puranas and all that. And we were just connecting all the dots, and that is how we came towards this particular solution. And basically understanding the environment around us, because our Vedic science is by after going through such an extensive research and study of scriptures, what I could understand is that when it comes to environment and ecology, when it comes to life sciences and nature, our scriptures are probably the most comprehensive knowledge bank on life sciences and natural sciences. So that is how we started connecting all the dots, and we understand. We started understanding the soil, water, air, cosmic energy, and fire, which are the five key elements of life as per the Vedic science, and that is how we arrived on this solution. So this is just one of the solutions that we are working on. There are plenty of other things. There is something into communication also. There is something into energy side also. So uh, the scriptures that we have, the science that we have in the scriptures, is a very comprehensive science, and there are three different aspects of knowledge in the country. Which one is yantra, one is mantra, and one is tantra. Right. So yantra is basically equipment based, which for which you see the entire world around us. Tantra is the process based, and mantra is the the radiation or the frequency based. So all these three aspects have got a plethora of knowledge and multiple things which can be done. So all that research is on. But our topic today is basically environment and ecology. So we will stick towards our topic only. And as you mentioned, I would like to reiterate on that the entire discussion is going to be more of interactive instead of a monologue, wherein I give a presentation and everybody listens. And that is why we had shared the videos uh, prior to the session, so that everybody is on the same page, and you can keep asking your queries, and I would be happy to answer all the queries so that you understand the science very well. Because it is more important to communicate and make you understand the ideologies, because all of us have been trained into the Western science, the Western way, uh, because the entire education system that we have in the country is all based on the Western syllabus. So it is very important that we understand our own science, our own Vedic scriptures, and our own ideology and understanding of the nature and the environment around us. So that is why the more interactive the session is, the better understanding would be developed, and the knowledge transfer can happen in a much better way. You know, so I think the pace is already set, and I expect that everybody has already gone through the videos. So, what we have divided the sessions into is, first is understanding the water, second is understanding the Vedic approach, and third is understanding the aqua ecology from which the entire economy is going to come out. So let us first start with water. Uh, I'm sure everybody would have gone through the first video at least, which was all about building an understanding on water, uh, how it is taken into consideration by the Vedic science and how it is understood by the Western science. There is basically an ideological difference in understanding water from the Western perspective and from the Vedic science perspective. Uh, the difference is, in the Western science it is restricted because all the knowledge is segregated in the Western science. Either it is physics or chemistry or biology, whereas the Vedic science has got a very holistic approach in which the water is considered as a living ecology, not as a dead substance. Uh, if you look at the human body also, you cannot segregate that, okay, only the blood report will determine the health of a person. There are plenty of other things. When you are analyzing the blood chemistry, you get to know a lot of things about the human body, but that is not the only axis or the parameter for understanding the body. There are plenty of other things which are equally important, and everything plays a very important role in towards the health of a person. Similarly, for water, it is not just the chemistry of water, the physicality of water is also very important. The biology in water is also very important. And overall, if you look at it, ecology is a larger domain for which the subsets are physics, chemistry, and biology. And that is what happens when your approach is based on physics. You only understand the physical attributes of water. When your approach is based on biology or chemistry, you understand only that much aspect, so you're not taking a holistic approach. But when you take a holistic approach, which is ecological approach, then you understand probably each and every subdomain of it, that okay, this is what is happening biologically, this is what is happening physically, and this is what is happening chemically, right? So all that is explained into the first video, and also there is a linkage between the recent developments into the modern science, and it is leading towards a holistic approach again. So that again was covered in the first video. Now I would invite all of you to ask your queries on the first video so that I can answer that, and you develop a better understanding of the entire session.
Thank you, Madhukarji. Before we bombard you with the questions or whatever, I would invite all my colleagues to just share a few lines about themselves, and their work, their interesting work. Like most of them are doing very interesting work at the organization. Maybe it would be also nice if they could share what their interest is and their nature of work is, so that you would also know where they will be coming from in terms of in their perspective about water. Thank you, and may I invite my colleagues to introduce themselves and share something about their work here. Thank you.
Hello, Madhukarji. Very good morning, and thankful to you because of your three videos have very clearly mentioned about the Vedic science and the approach towards the water. We have been working in integrated farming approach, but sorry to mention that under the MG Energy program, we have been working last 2 years to remove the sludge from the ponds. So, in your videos, you have mentioned about the removal of sludge is not good because it removes all the microbes and other component, which is very uh, friendly and working towards the entire water ecology. But under MG Energy, we have been remove that also. That part is I have understood that is not good at all. So I would like to know more about the Vedic approach so that I can and my team can transmit this to the farmers how we can manage the water ecology in rural areas, especially because the farmers are still not very um, knowledge skilled about this water ecology and all. So this is my one request. And second thing is we would like to know more about the mm, minerals and uh, the approach, how we could work uh, for maintaining the good, what is it, ecosystem.
Perfect, Vijayji. Thanks for giving me your ideas. The sludge removal is important, but then it is not removal. I would rather call it a sludge digestion,
Yes,
because whatever sludge is coming in, ultimately it is an overload of the nutrients. So these
yes,
nutrients have to be consumed. Pollution of a water body should be taken as something which is like uh, within the human body, it is like overeating. So when you have
yes,
gone to a party or a marriage celebration and you have overeaten, you don't undergo a surgery. All you need is something like maybe Hajmola or Jandu Pancharest and you are done, right? Or
yes,
maybe you eat Digene or something, right? All these medicines, what are they doing? They are boosting your metabolic activity at the cellular level of the human body, so that whatever has been eaten gets digested, and the adenosine triphosphate molecules reaches all the cells of the body, and the cells of the body break it down to release the energy, and that is what is required to be done, right?
yes,
Whereas what approach we are taking by physically removing it is something like a surgery.
yes,
When you are putting in physical efforts for removal of the sludge from the bottom of the water body, you are basically doing a surgical intervention into the aqua ecology. That is why it has to be avoided, because the aqua ecology is self capable of consuming the overload of the nutrients. Now how
yes,
it is done is very simple. There are single celled organism in the aqua ecology. There is a food chain. Within every natural water body, there is a aquatic food chain. That aquatic food chain consists of single-celled organisms, which are consumed by the plankton, which are again consumed by the fishes, and the fish excreta is ammonia, which is again neutralized by the single-celled organism. Right
yeah,
now, whatever you add into the water, that is initially suspended, then dissolved, and finally settled. What is settled is what we call sludge, right? So it is just the undigested nutrient load which is settled in the bottom of the tank. Now, what we need to do is resurrect the aqua ecology, for which we have developed this Taunomics technology, which is study of the water body, and then after the careful study of the water body, we make a medicine which is 100% herbal extract, which is diluted into the water from the same agroclimatic zone, and then it is released into the water body in presence of sunlight. This medicine, which has been added into the water body, gets synthesized in the aqua ecology, and the resurrection process happens. So, when the native microbiota is back into action, they will consume all the deposited sludge, and the aqua ecology will be healthy, and the sludge layer will be removed. The moment the sludge layer is removed, the biggest benefit that the water body gets is linkage with the underground aquifer through the soil capillaries, which means your water body will neither ever flood nor it will ever get dried, because during the peak of the summer when the evaporation rate is high, the pressure on the surface water body is reduced and the pressure in the aquifer is increased, so water is pulled up from the underground aquifer. Secondly, during the peak of monsoon, when the pressure on the surface water body is high, the pressure in the aquifer is low. The same soil capillaries are used for pumping in the water into the aquifer, which is what we call as rainwater harvesting or recharge of the underground water table. That happens naturally without any machine, without any apparatus. So this is the natural system, the restoration of which is going to help the entire aquatic environment, which is going to help boost up the natural life in the water. And secondly, this is also going to ensure that the water body is perennial. So that is how this problem is addressed naturally by the aqua ecology.
Madhukarji, I think Lal Vijay
Thank you.
has another
Yeah,
query
Yeah.
on about transfer of technology to farmers, like how this technology can be taken like into farmers in the areas like where he is working is
See,
another
the,
query, I
the
guess.
moment the native ecology is restored, then there is no need for this technology to happen unless until the regular sewage is coming into the water body. The aqua ecology is capable of maintaining itself. Any living body has got a self-healing mechanism. Like if you have a cut on our body, that gets healed up naturally. I mean, it is not mandatory that you have to put in a betadine or you have to put in a band-aid onto it. Otherwise, it will not heal. So any, you must have heard the moment of inertia in physics. You know, any body which is living would love to continue to live, you know. So the self-healing mechanism would always be working. Once the water bodies are restored, then you don't need any restoration technology. It will be maintained unless until there is a regular sewage input coming in. So if it is a aquaculture water body, obviously the consistent input of sewage will not be there. So Lal Vijay ji, if
yeah.
that answers your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Fine. Sir, my second request, maybe it is, if we can have more uh, uh, breeding materials, so that we can simplify for the farmers also,
Yeah.
and those who are working in village and GP level. So it will be better for us.
Sure, you can log on to our website. There are two websites. One is community friendly movement website, which is cfmglobal.org, wherein you can read about the project. And as far as the pure technology is concerned, there is a website which is called vedicsrijan.com, wherein you can go and study about various projects. You will have a lot of YouTube video channel links also. You'll have a lot of the audio podcast links also, and all sorts of articles which have been published into various media, whether it is web media or print media or magazines or journals and all that. So it is Vedic
Thank you.
Srijan, VAIDICSRIJAN.com, and the other website is CFM Global, GLOBAL.org. So that was Lal Vijay ji. If you have any queries, Lal Vijay ji, you can ask your next query, or anybody else who would like to introduce
Hello.
and move on.
Hi, Madhukar This is Sunny here. Good
Hello,
morning.
Sunny ji, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. I'm fine, Madhukar
Yeah.
Actually, in fact, actually, I lost the. I mean, I supposed to be in the minister's program. It got delayed, so that's
Okay.
why I got an opportunity to interact with you all.
Okay.
So my query is that generally. under NAREGA, most of the programs underwater, desiltation activities are happening. The concept is that the earlier water bodies which were uh, sufficient depth and then become a the what all the water bodies become, like a saucer. Earlier it was like a teacup and then become a saucer. So somehow we need to manage to dig some material from the bottom and then make it those water bodies to store some water. That's a kind of general concept following, and investment also is happening in such a way. So as for your discussion saying that so we should not disturb the nature ecosystem, otherwise the recharge, the potential recharge may damage and the spring connections may be damaged. So how do you understand this activity into our Vedic concept? Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Saniji, for asking this question. See, I'll give you a very simple example. I'm obese. So, do I need to go bariatric surgery, or do I need to hit the gym with a vengeance? What is better for my body? Every time the surgical process is not a good process. You know, what are we doing when we are digging up the water body? It is a surgical operation, right? Basically, when I'm obese, there is a fat deposit in my body, and the fat gets deposit only in a particular order. When you start exercising, when you go to a gym, the fat removal also happens in the same stages. Like the last stage will go first, the first stage of deposition will go last. So the same order in which the fat has come, the fat will go in the same order. Similarly, it goes through with the water body also. When you are resurrecting the native ecology, the first effect that you will get into the suspended solids, because suspended solids are the one which will eventually get dissolved and then finally get settled as the bottom layer of sludge. So all the water bodies are getting dried because of the bottom deposition, and the water level is going up. So the holding capacity is reducing. The moment you start treating the water body and resurrecting the native ecology, the first step will be a steep reduction into the suspended solids. Eventually it will start affecting the dissolved solids, and finally it will start consuming the sludge layer. So all that is what is happening step by step, and the best process is that the dredging should be done ecologically, which is digestion of the sludge, not physical removal of the sludge. Like the barimetry surgery, when it happens, you start removing the fat from the body, and then what do you do with the fat? It is ultimately a waste only, because it was a waste within the body also. Any person who is obese, if he is left for a few days into a desert, he will get slim, because the body will start consuming the deposited fats. So that is how you have to increase the metabolic rate for consumption of the extra or the overload of the nutrients within the body. Fat is also kind of a nutrition. We have got five components into our balanced diet, which is protein, vitamin, carbohydrate, fats, right, and minerals. So fats are not bad. Fats are basically a product of nature only, and there is a proper requirement into a balanced diet for fat as well. So that is how the overload of the nutrient is also equally required into the aqua ecology. Only thing is, because it is overloaded, because it is being supplied for more than the consumption of the aqua ecology, that is why it gets deposited. The moment it starts getting consumed, the aqua ecology will be back in shape. and it can be used. See, the concept of waste is a human creation. In nature, there is nothing called waste. Waste of one is good for another. So you just have to find out the right practices so that every wastage gets consumed, and the cyclic nature of the ecology continues to go. So there is no need for a physical desilting, because silt is important. The problem is the government and the administration doesn't understand the difference between the silt and the sludge. The sludge is to be removed, and the silt has to remain there for the soil capillaries to function properly.
And
Um,
how do we differentiate between I mean the two particles you're telling? One is sludge, the other one is silt.
See,
So
silt is a natural creation and sludge is a man's creation. Sludge is basically the chemical that we supply, which gets settled in the bottom of the tank, and silt is basically, if you look at the water molecule, it is we all know it is H2O, but the O is in center, and two positively charged hydrogen atoms are there in the bottom. Now, to neutralize, to stabilize the molecule, there are two electrons in the top. Right. So electrons are negatively charged and hydrogen atoms are positively charged. So it is a bipolar molecule. So when the bipolar substance is given any speed, it will start rotating. So water movement is always spiral movement. So when you put water into a tank and it is moving spirally, it is grinding the bottom. So this bottom, which has got soil, due to this grinding action, the soil gets converted into the nanoparticle that we call as silt. This silt opens the soil capillary to establish a link between the surface water body and the underground aquifer. So that is how the silt gets created naturally, and the sludge is basically whatever pollution we've added. When it gets settled, it becomes sludge. Now, the basic differentiator is something that we can only test it in the lab. None of our machines are specialized enough to differentiate between the sludge and the silt. So that is why resurrection of the native ecology is the best method for consumption of sludge. So if the single-celled organisms are kept into best of their health, they will consume all the sludge and they will only leave the silt.
yeah, yeah. So when it got the water body mm, changed in their uh, whatever it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
So what can we suggest? Like that entire the shape of the body got changed.
yeah.
So in this case, the water is not storing. The farmer says that earlier it was a good depth, and then we used to use this one for many activities, even for washing our buffaloes and cattle,
Mhm.
and taking water for our domestic purpose. Now,
Yeah.
because of water is not storing, because it's a completely, I mean, Indian terminology, like పూడ్చుకుపోయింది in Telugu, it's a silted. So we are using the word is silt, not so far. Now we are learning the other the terminology. So, but so in this perspective, the people who are having perspective, so how do we renovate that particular water body which already is filled with sludge and silt?
See, when the water body is filled with silt and sludge, basically what is happening is the depth of the water body is getting uh, decreased because of the sludge layer being deposited in the bottom, right? If you're wanting to understand what does the water body get dried, it is getting dried because it is getting filled in the bottom, and the thickness of the layer of water is reducing, right? So the sludge deposition has to be consumed for two things. Number one is recharge of the water from the aquifer, and number two is the increasing the holding capacity of the water body. Right. So when both the things are done, then the water body also goes perennial. It will never get dried nor it will get flooded, because whenever there is too much of water, the water will straight away go down and recharge the aquifer. Whenever there is too high rate of evaporation, the water will be pulled up from the aquifer and the water body will be perennial. So what we suggest for such water bodies which are getting dried every summer, the treatment should be deployed for a year's time, so that the original depth is restored through the ecological dredging process. And once that is done, your water body is good for being perennial. All 12 months there will be water, and they can continue to use the same way, whether they were using it for bathing of their cattle, or they were using it for aquaculture, or for irrigation, or for any other purpose of water usage.
Yeah. Thank you, Mukherjee. Yeah, I got it.
So anybody else who would like to go next?
Yeah, I invite anyone.
Karan, may I ask a question?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
please,
please.
please, Rachel.
Yes. So I just needed to know, like, what is, I mean, like, till this time, we, like, what I had studied, my background is in water science and technology. So we always concentrated on the silt part of, and that is the reason we do desiltation of the tanks and structures. So if the source, like what you have explained in the lecture also and what you are saying now also is, due to the spiral movement of the water, the soil gets cut out into nanoparticles, which we call this as silt. But if the source is from outside, let's say the source of the silt is from outside other than the tank, so is it like recommended to remove that silt?
I mean, can you cite some example? Are you talking about a lake or a pond, or you're talking about a river?
No, I'm talking about a pond which is being filled by runoff water.
Okay.
So that in this case, the runoff water is carrying silt along with it,
Okay.
and then that silt will eventually get deposited into the tank where the water storage is there. So
Right.
then what, like over a period of time, that silt is going to deposit and it is going to reduce the capacity of the tank.
No, no, that will not get. If it is silt, it is not deposited in the bottom. It is always traveling through the soil capillaries. When the water is going from the surface water body to the aquifer, it is carrying all the minerals along, which are there in the tank, which are excess. And when the water is being pulled up from the aquifer to the surface water body, it is carrying all the minerals from the multiple layers of soil, which are necessity for the aqua ecology to be maintained. See, when I explained about the aquatic food chain, the single-celled organism consumed by plankton, consumed by the fishes, whose excreta is ammonia, which is again consumed by the single-celled organism, all this has got a mineral cycle, right? So minerals are consistently required even for maintenance of the aquatic food chain. All these minerals are consumed in the aqua ecology. So whatever excess you have will either be passed on to the layers of the soil when the water is going down to the aquifer, or it will be if there is a lacking, that lacking will be fulfilled by the water when it is coming up through the soil capillaries from the different layers of the soil. So that is how the entire chain is maintained. Now, if you are talking about something like silica, which is coming in, typically the sand or the silica which comes in into the river water, or you can say estuaries and all. So all that is also required by the uh, aquatic food chain, because there are millions and billions of single-celled organisms. Some of those organisms also consume silica into their regular metabolic activity. So the excess of silica is also consumed within the ecology itself. So you don't have to worry about what happens to the silt coming in from the outside. There is a proper mechanism into the nature for consumption of whatever excess is coming into the water body.
Okay. And then, sir, I just needed to know one more thing. Then, what is the source of sludge which is taking place in that pond body? Is it the only microorganisms which are present over there, their excreta part, or something more adapts to that sludge part?
See, the sludge is basically whatever chemicals you put in. The chemicals, there is a basic property of water, that anything you put into water will get decomposed. That is a basic nature of water. It creates the right environment for the decomposition to happen, whether it is a chemical decomposition or biological decomposition. The decomposition is inevitable when the environment is water. Now, when you're putting in the chemicals, like typically what is the content of a sewage? Sewage will contain excess of ammonical compounds and excess of phosphate compounds. In the places where sewage is getting mixed with the industrial effluent, there will be a lot of sulfate compounds also. So phosphate, sulfate, and you can call ammonical compound or ammonia, nitrate, nitrite. These are the key contents of sewage. Now, how are they traveling along with water? We have made water as a de facto waste transport media. So, how do they travel in water? Is basically in two forms: either they are suspended or they are dissolved. So that is why you always take account of total suspended solid and total dissolved solids. Now, suspension is the first stage, dissolving is the second stage, and settlement is the third and the final stage. So what we get as sludge is basically the settled solids, which are there in form of phosphate, sulfate, nitrate, nitrite, and ammonical compound. In case of industrial effluent, the the mix will also have some heavy metals and minerals, which are over and above the sulfate, phosphate, and nitrates. So that is basically the content of the sludge.
Okay. So, like, when you're saying, so this is last, I mean, like, in conclusion to this question, so we are saying the source of sludge could be this sewage water or industrial waste. But in villages, when we see it out in the tanks, so, I mean, like, at least the limited knowledge I have, I haven't seen in villages, they leave out this sewage water into the tanks. So, in that case, but still there is like this so still the sludge we say that there's sludge deposition in that in those tanks but like there is no alter the sludge or industrial inputs into it.
See, we can create our own nomenclature anywhere. Like we have divided water into runoff water, into storm water, into the flood water, and there's so many kinds of water that we have created, whereas there is only one water. Now, what happens is when you have an agriculture land around a water body, you are using lots and lots of chemicals, whether it is fertilizers or insecticides or pesticides. And whenever the water is coming in from these kind of farms into the water body, they are carrying all these chemicals along. So the content here again, I mean, we can call it a sewage, we can call it an industrial effluent, we can call it runoff water or storm water. There is a difference of the percentage, but the content happens to be the same.
Okay, okay, thank you, thanks.
So, anyone else in the group? Anybody else? Any queries?
Uh, Is there anyone uh, have some
Madhurji,
queries with here?
so we have been talking about the to have a pond treatment. So my question is, how much time it will take to control the aquatic weeds, and how it can be best control, and what is the time difference between the biological control way and chemical control way?
See, the chemical controlled way is actually just working on the lab parameters of the water, right? So it takes its own sweet time, but it is not basically working on the holistic way. As far as our approach is concerned, our approach is the the stages are very well defined. The first stage is eradication of the foul smell if it is there into the water body. Now this phase will take about 24 hours of exposure to the sunlight, which means one day you get 8 hours of sunlight, second day another 8 hours, third day another 8 hours. That means the third day, by end of the third day or beginning of the fourth day, the foul smell will be eradicated. Now, eradication of the foul smell means the environment from anaerobic has turned aerobic. Now, aerobic environment means the eradication of the anaerobic digestion, which was the cause of the foul smell. So this is the first effect. The second stage is also running parallelly, but you get to see the result only after about a week's time. That is the improvement into the water quality and the improvement in the water viscosity. So viscosity, when it is reducing, you will see the normal wavy water, like what is there into the picture behind me. This is Idudi Lake in Ahmedabad that we had restored, and here you can see how wavy is the water without any windy environment. Now, why water is wavy is only because it is the basic property of the water to move. Water is never static. We only define it as a standing water and the running water, but water is always on a move. So that is how the effect on the uh, color and the viscosity will be observed in the second stage. Now, when the water is wavy, the mosquito colonies get abolished. So, the third phase obviously is eradication of mosquito colonies from the water body, which will take about 10 to 15 days from the beginning of the project. And then it will be an effect like if you are consistently monitoring the lab parameters also, right from day one you'll see a steep decline into the suspended solids and the COD, and eventually it will start affecting the dissolved solids. Eventually it will start affecting the color, the what do you call the BOD level. So all those effects will start coming in, and then if there is any kind of algal bloom into the water, into the fourth phase, the algal bloom will be separated from the water layer clearly. I mean, anybody can see a clear demarcation between the algal bloom and the water, because the top layer is getting lighter and it is getting wavy. The color is also becoming lighter, right? So that can simply be differentiated just by having a look at the water without any lab testing or any lab parameters. So that is the fourth phase, and then the effect will be there into the water weeds, if any, in the water. So the weeds will start getting weaker by end of the first month, and by the end of uh, third month, the first quarter, the entire weeds will get eradicated. You don't have to physically remove the weeds if the weeds are not like hyacinth, because hyacinth is a very ruggedized weed. So it will take its own sweet time, maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year, to completely dissolve. and eradicate from the surface. Whereas the other weeds, which are relatively weaker weeds, like you have water lilies, or you have azolla, or you have hydrilla, these kind of weeds will disappear in a matter of 1 quarter. So that is how step by step the resurrection will start showing into the visual effect and the human experiences. Anybody else?
Yeah.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
So, in Bihar, there is a very good demand of makhana.
Yes.
So, just for my queries, if we introduce the herbicides, then is there any effect seen in the makhana culture?
Yeah, it will grow. You will get a better crop. We are not using any herbicides, sir. We are only using plant extracts. And these plant extracts are to be used only for a specific purpose. That is why, till the time the study of the water body is not complete, we cannot kind of make the medicine. And without the medicine, the treatment cannot happen.
Okay, so it's all depends upon the pond water ecology and the pond size of the water bodies and pond depth, so that only we can make the plant extract medicine, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Madhukar.
Yeah, because we also have very experienced colleagues here. Patroji is here and Sudhakarji is here, who has tremendous knowledge and experience on the ground, uh, dealing with water bodies and all. Like any questions from Sudhakarji or Patroji would really help the rest of the team to understand, because we are not exposed as much as you do. So any queries from your personal experience observations would add a lot of value to this discussion.
Uh,
Patraji, Sudhakarji,
Kanan, this is
Sunnyji,
Sunny.
I have
Hi,
yes,
hi,
yes,
Kanan.
yes.
In Rayalaseema, a few of the water bodies, they are making one layer, cemented layer, to store more water. So, is it the good practice?
No, not at all,
Because
sir.
it's a low rainfall, whatever the water stored in rainy season. So, due to evaporation as well as the sinking it. To avoid that, in when the pond dries up, so they are applying a one layer with a cemented thing that Sudhakar might may explain how they do the cement layer and all that. But is it a good practice? That's my question.
That is not a good practice at all, because it is basically creating an intervention into the native ecology. See, what happens is, why are water bodies unique? We must understand this basic phenomena of how a water body is separate from any other terrestrial body. See, there are only three habitats possible on this planet, that is soil, water, and air. These are the only three media for the single celled organism, or any organism, any kind of life to survive upon. Right? Why water bodies are different is, water body is the only natural apparatus wherein all these three ecologies are coming into direct contact. Bottom is soil, then we have water, and then we have air, right? So in every water body, we are creating the biggest possible pool of single celled organism to revive the ecology, right? The moment you're putting in a layer of cement, you are disconnecting the soil layer. When the soil layer is disconnected, obviously there are no capillaries being formed. When there are no capillaries being formed, obviously the recharge of the water body, the underground water table, you can call it rainwater harvesting, that will not happen. And secondly, the recharge of the water body from the aquifer will also not happen. So we are intervening surgically into the existing ecology, and we are trying to create a hurdle into the ecology. So it is basically, the problem is the moment you want to understand about environment in India, the only education channel possible is you do environment engineering. You go to any government department and you talk about environment and ecology, you'll have civil engineers who are managing it, right? So an engineer is a person who always believes in uh, doing things. He is a karma yogi. Till the time I am not doing anything, nothing will happen. So he believes in doing things, right? Whereas in ecology is sustainable only because things are happening within our body. Are we controlling our heartbeats? Are we controlling our kidney functions? No, we are not. These are all happening on its own, right? That is what is ecology. There is something which is happening in physics, something in biology, and something in chemistry. But the holistic approach is what is called ecology. So the soil layer is important for rainwater harvesting also and for recharge. So I guess you got the answer. It is not good for the lake. It may be good for the contractor who is doing it because he is making a lot of money out of it. But it's not good for the environment and ecology.
Thank you, Madhukar.
Patraji and Sudhakarji, you have tremendous amount of experience on the ground because you personally like dealt with water bodies basically in two different areas in Srikakulam as well as very arid regions like of Anantapur, like which is like so arid, and Chittor. So if you could share any of your experiences and observations with Madhukarji and us, it would be very enriching experience and information for us. I invite you to either share something from your experiences or ask something so that it would enrich the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kannaji. We have some small water bodies in Chittoor district like check dams and open irrigation wells. As well, farmers also themselves created a farm ponds with soil water depth is 2 meters maximum. What Sunny sir said, but some of the farmers they are using cemented laying bottom of the pond. Some of the farmers using for polish sheet under the bottom side. So these are the type of water bodies available, but these all are maximum 4 to 5 months water holding capacity. So within the 5 to 6 months, maximum 6 months, water holding capacity these ponds are. So we have any interventions if you invade this. This is my point. Uh,
Yeah, Madhukarji, Sudhakarji had been working and associated with Vasan for a very long time. He is one of our senior colleagues, and he is stationed at Anantapur and Chittor of Andhra Pradesh, which is the only arid region in the state, where the annual rainfall is to the minimum, and it's the most driest part of Andhra Pradesh. And he had been there and has tremendous amount of experience in those areas. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Sudhakarji.
yeah, that is my point. If you utilize that water harvesting structures, water bodies for even 6 months, is there any plan for that?
See, Sudhakarji, when you start treating the water body and you continue it for 6 months, the rest of the 6 months when it get dried, you
Yes.
won't get that kind of drying of the water body because in the first 6 months you will be able to establish the link with the aquifer. So if you can ensure that the first 6 months are totally filled with water, then
Yeah.
balance months will naturally get filled with water. You don't have to worry about that, that the next 6 months will get dried. It is getting dried only because the link with the aquifer is not there. The moment
Yeah.
you are able to establish that, the balance 6 months will not go dry. They will still be having water.
Oh, from okay. We link with other water bodies,
No, no, not
right,
with
sir?
other water bodies. The surface water body will get linked with the underground aquifer through the soil capillaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Madhukarji, in order to establish linkage, weathering is probably thousands of years of process. So how is it possible? Like, even
No,
if
no,
we
it is,
dug it,
it is not thousands of years of process. It will happen immediately. I mean, just by 6 months of treatment, you will be able to establish that link. What
and
Okay,
what you
how?
can
great.
probably do is you can just visit onto our YouTube channel. There is a video on rainwater harvesting wherein there is a guy in the state of Chhattisgarh, and he is giving his own case study wherein his district has already been declared drought affected, and he is trying to empty his pond by pumping out, physically pumping out water so that he can take out fishes. And you can listen to his experience. He was running the pond only for 6 months, and he was unable to empty the pond even for one continuous week, because he was running out the pumping out of the water only during the daytime, and in the night it used to get refilled.
But
So
what if
that is
in
a
case the aquifer is uh, is obstructed, like by a bedrock, or if that aquifer is not present in that particular spot, what should we do?
See, water cannot be restricted. Water finds out its own ways. So wherever the water is there, it will flow. How it will flow, where it will flow, that is their natural intelligence. That is the intelligence of the ecology, wherein it will find out its ways to recharge and refill. So you don't have to worry about that. It happens naturally.
I think Vidya has another question here. How can we treat hypomia infestation as it grows anywhere nearby the pond and land?
Is that on the chat window or something?
Yes, yes.
Just a sec, let me just open it up.
There's a couple of questions there.
Okay. How can we treat hypomia infestation as it grows anywhere nearby the pond and the land? See, we can only treat the water, and once the treatment is on any kind of weed that we have in the water, the feed for the weed gets consumed in the aqua ecology. So what happens is, why are weeds coming into the water? The weeds are basically coming into the water only for the basic reason that there is enough feed for the weed. So what happens is, this feed, which is in the form of phosphate or sulfate or nitrate or anything, I mean, the eutrophication is a process which happens because there is an overload of nutrients, and these nutrients cannot be consumed in the aqua ecology. That is why weeds have come out. Now, if the feed for the weed gets naturally consumed in the ecology, obviously the weeds will not get their feed and they will dry down. When they dry down, they get sunken into the water itself, and they are also decomposed biologically. So what we need to do is, I mean, one simple process that everybody understands is that we stop doing the production of the sewage, so that the overload of the nutrient doesn't happen. Right? But we have changed our lifestyle like anything in past 100 years. So now we cannot change our lifestyle immediately. So what we need to do is we need to give some extra dose of Hajmola for the aqua ecology to consume the excess. So that is precisely what we're doing. So does it mean that all
Hello.
ponds can be revived to the perennial naturally? Yes, that's correct, Prachiji. And one
Sunny
more
has
question.
raised a hand.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
come to Sunny ji. Let me just go through
Yeah,
Bidya
yeah,
ji's
yeah.
one more question. When we need to apply plant extract in the pond before fish stocking or after stocking or during stocking, what can be the best practice? Okay. See, the best practice is we first start the treatment and keep observing the water. When the water gives us a signal that okay, it is the right time to release the fishes, then we release the fish, and the dosing or the treatment will continue. It is not that the treatment is anti fishes or anti any kind of life. It is completely supporting life. So it's not that there are going to be any adverse effect for the fish stock which is there. So that will continue to happen. It will start from before release of the fishes and will continue till after the release of fishes. So water will give you the signal when to dose, when not to dose. You know, if you interact with the farmer will always tell you that my crop is asking for water or my crop is asking for the fertilizer or anything, because that is an internal connect with which gets established between the farmer and the crop. You know, the similar way when you are doing the resurrection of the native ecology, the even your soil, water, and air will give you a lot of signal that okay, now you need a treatment, or now you don't need a treatment. So that is how it happens. So Sunny ji, you can ask your question now.
Yeah. Thank you, Madhukar ji. So really useful for your experiences and thoughts, because we have been in the field area. So whatever the current things we know, those are things I think is false information dissemination is happening. So now we got some ecological perspective now have. So regarding fish culture initiation in tribal area, so there is a under package. We also suggest to apply lime before stocking it as a part of the treatment of water. Is it the that practice should continue, or do you have any other alternative things? And the second question, the water infestations, particularly with some plants like Ipomea, Eichhornia, Typhalatifolia. These are the major three species we found in water bodies. So how do we, I mean, to balance with our natural way, yeah, in terms of no high nutrition in the water. Thank you.
Now, Sunny, what you have described is basically a part of our initial study before we make the medicine. So, if there is a particular kind of weeds or a particular kind of crop that you are wanting to grow into a particular water body, we need to understand all that scenario before we make the medicine. So, whatever is required and whatever is not required has to be the basic indicators towards selection of the herbs that we uh, use for making the medicine. So all that is the part of the study of the water body, and accordingly the medicine is made. Like I give you a couple of examples like hydrola or azola. These are all the weeds which come up into a water body depending upon the ecoclimatic zone. But this is also a natural selection. There was one of the pond that we were doing here in Uttar Pradesh. There is a place called Muradabad, wherein we were doing this resurrection, and we found out that in one single pond, which is hardly about 1 acre pond, there were 16 different varieties of weeds. Right? Whereas usually, if you look at a water body, you'll find only one or two types of weeds. So all that is a natural intelligence, a natural selection of the biodiversity of the wetland, wherein what kind of weeds will come and what kind of weeds will not come. So all that is a part of the study, and that is how we make the medicine. And when the treatment starts, all the unwanted things get consumed in the ecology itself, and all the things which you desire to be there because you are rearing those species. So all those things will remain there. So that's how it happens.
Regarding lime application, sir.
Lime application is not required at all. When your water body is in good shape, when the aqua ecology is restored, you don't need to put any kind of lime there. Lime is basically you are adding because CaCO3 will react with H2O and the release of oxygen will happen. So you're trying to build the DO level. That's it. There is no other application for lime.
Thank you, thanks a lot, Madhukar.
Madhukarji, we have three of our colleagues here, like who have been doing like some interesting stuff. Like Jay Prakash is here, JJ Visha is here, and Rakesh is here. So I and Jay Prakash, like we were discussing about Pani Panchayats and building institutions around these water bodies. I hope like in Jay Prakash, like you might have found all this interaction and new dimension of understanding this water like interesting, and it would be great like if Jay Prakash like have some questions and queries like with Madhukarji, and JJ Visha is here who is basically dealing with marketing, and she anchored like one project on production of spinach in one of our production areas. So I was just wondering if Gigi has any queries or like is there any new dimensions like she has observed like from this interaction.
Kanna, I was just going through the chat box. I think you asked the question: weathering from air, does weathering happen due to other elements of nature? Could you please elaborate on the query so that I can answer that before we move on to Jijivisha and other queries?
Yeah, I just asked this, and Prachi like has also responded to that, saying weathering like it does happen, and there is this like physical as well as chemical uh, ways of like weathering of rock, and chemical weathering like which predominantly happens like due to this chemical reaction with water, and most of the silt like that is released, or the minerals like that are released.
No, you mentioned weathering from air. Weathering of what?
Weathering of rock.
Rock.
Yeah.
Weathering of rock from air.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are talking about either the winds, which are like the recent tempest that we saw, the Yas and the Taute, which were coming in from opposite directions, one from Arabian Sea and another one from Bay of Bengal. So those are the high-speed winds which can cut the rock. But apart from that, also there is something called particulate matter in air that we call as the indicator of the air pollution. Now, if you remember, in the year 1984, there was a case lodged against Union of India that was for weathering of the Taj Mahal. And why Taj Mahal weathering was happening was primarily because COX, NOx, and SOx, which is uh, carbon oxides, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur oxides, which are there in form of particulate matter in the air. Now, when these COX, NOx, and SOx get water in form of rain, they react with water and they form a kind of acid. Now, this is what is the phenomena of acid rains. Because of acid rain, the Taj Mahal was getting corroded. So, Advocate MC Mehta had lodged the case against Union of India, and he won the case. After which, from a vicinity of 25 kilometers of Taj Mahal, all the industries were eradicated due to government orders, due to the court orders. Right now, this is something which has been happening all through the history of mankind on this planet. I mean, not just history of mankind, all through the history of the planet itself. Because whenever there is any kind of volcanic eruption, whenever there is any kind of forest fire, all these will release COX, NOx, and SOx into the air. And wherever the rain will happen, these will react with the H2O molecules and formulate an acid. It can be nitric acid, it can be sulfuric acid, it can be your carbolic acid. And these acids, when they fall on the land, on the rock, or any kind of hard surface, it will react because it is acid and it will neutralize, or you can call it weather the rock, right? So it is not that we need a typhoon to cut the rock. There are other natural processes as well. I'm sure that would have answered your question, Kanna.
Yeah. It's like revisiting my environmental pollution class again. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I request Gigi, Rakesh,
Yeah,
maybe ask
yeah.
Ravi.
Kanaji, can I
Yeah,
ask something?
Patraji, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, Madhukarji. This is Patra from Srikakulam.
Namaskar,
You
Patraji.
know this. Namaste, sir.
You would be
Uh,
working very closely with Patraji Madhukarji.
yes, sir. It's very good. I will touch with sir every day. When I will doing the field work, then I will call you or other and may disturb you. Sir, I want to
I
know
will.
one thing. You are suggesting, sir, lime is not required at all. But here, some fisheries experts, like from fisheries department, they suggesting lime when water pH level is go high or goes down, some like that, some acidity. So that's where that's time they suggested to use the lime. Is that manner it's good or not, as per your opinion, sir?
See, as far as my approach is concerned, any chemical intervention is not required. We are already putting in too much of chemicals into water, so we should not on purpose do it. As I explained it to you, lime is basically CaCO3. The CaCO3 is basically reacting with water, and that is how it is helping. I mean, if you put a normal the lime, the basic stone form, and you put that into water, it will release a lot of oxygen, right?
Oh,
So that is precisely what we are doing with the application of lime. So wherever there is no other scope, there
yeah.
you are doing it because you have no other availability. As far as my treatment is concerned, into wherever we are treating any pond, we are not using any kind of lime because it is not a necessity at all.
Oh,
You have to balance a pH, or you have to release the oxygen. There are people who are using hydrogen peroxide tablets. They just put in the
oh,
tablet, the hydrogen
oh,
peroxide will react with water and release oxygen. So that
oh.
is how people are using it. There are people who are using vinegar for that pH balance. All that is just a, you can call it a jugaad. It
Oh,
is not the actual science.
okay, okay. Thank you. I got it. One more thing, sir. Actually, here where I am working in Srikakulam, there are most of the farmers having small, like farm ponds or 1-2 acres ponds, like that. Or whether 3, 4, yeah, 5, 10 acres ponds are there, those are then commercial farmers they got it. But most of the farmers following the organic manner, sir, because these are the tribal area, so they have small ponds. they are going only organic manner. But one thing, say they using only cow dung or rice bran or millet brans, those things are those they have in home at home. But one I have a question, small. I think you might be say it silly. Those I observed that two ponds are nearby, but neighbor ponds. One farmer giving rice bran, cow dung is a good thing. They are using good burst quantity, good quantity of the fluid. But neighbor farmer not giving like that quantity. But where result shows that where the smell less feed given the farmer, they could same like that results. But he got never got that result. What is the difference? I think as your real thing. That is you can say it's a silly. But I thinking what is the causes? What is the
No, no.
reasons? How we can measure that?
See, Patra Sahab, every water body is a different individual case, even if they are nearby.
Yeah.
Like I will give you one live example.
Yeah.
If you have heard of Kailash Mansarovar, uh, where people go for this yatra via China these days, and government of India is making another route to Kailash Mansarovar, which will be only India route. Now, this Kailash Mansarovar place, this Kailash is a Parvat, and there are 3 water bodies around within a radius of just about 2-3 kilometers. There is one huge lake which is called Mansarovar Lake. There is another small pond kind of a place which is called the Gauri Kund, and there is another huge lake which is called the Rakshastal Lake. Okay. Now Rakshastal has got complete saline water. Mansarovar is complete sweet water, and Gauri Kund is again a different taste of water altogether, but it is at least drinkable. But nobody goes to Gauri Kund because there is a story attached, right? Now the water comes from Mansarovar, goes to Gauri Kund, and it reaches the Rakshastal, and still it is the same water which is circulating. Still, Rakshastal is not a drinkable water. Gauri Kund is a different taste but drinkable, and Mansarovar is totally sweet water. Right? In Rakshastal, there is absolutely zero life. There is no life at all. In Mansarovar, there are huge fishes. In Gauri Kund also, there are a lot of fishes. And these are all nearby ponds. Right? So every water body has got a different ecology, and that is why we need to understand every water body before we make a medicine. Even if you ask me to prepare a medicine for 2 ponds which are side by side, there could be a possibility that both the medicines are different.
Oh, right. Yes, sir, right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We have we have almost arrived at the end of the time. It's already like 12:29. So
I just
yeah,
wanted
Jyoti,
to
please.
I just wanted to thank. So I was not able to watch all the videos. Watched one of them, but being part of this session today was really informative. Learned a lot of new things. I'm not that much familiar with water ecology and things like that. Madhukarji, I don't know if because my thing is more with like Vidya is also here. If you can maybe in a few minutes, if time permits, tell something about fish culture or something, and its implications of the whole thing that you discussed right now of what happens, the pollution that happens, and how it is connected to fish culture, especially for small farmers, because the model that they are doing there is in small farm ponds. They are promoting fish culture with the small farmers or community members.
See, fishes don't see whether my farmer is big or small. What fishes need, if you look at any kind of life rearing, whether you are farming for fishes or shrimps or turtles or crabs or uh, uh, fin fishes or your shellfishes or anything. I mean, even if you are farming for cattle or dogs or horses or anything, basically any organism except for human beings, because human beings has got something called a brain, so they start thinking in a different tangent altogether. For all the other species on this planet, all they need is three things should be ensured: ample amount of fresh water, ample amount of their natural native feed, and a peaceful habitat. Now let us translate this into the fishery sector. Where do you get the freshest of the fishes? You get the freshest of the fishes either in a river or in the sea. Neither in the river nor in the sea anybody is feeding them. So they're getting their natural feed. They're getting their natural environment. And that is why you get the freshest of the fishes there. Right? So what exactly is their natural environment? How does the feed comes in there? And when they eat it, how exactly are they going to remain disease free, and how are they going to get a good what do you call it, population, right? All this is linked to the fish farmer's income. And when you are doing any kind of production, whether it is a factory or whether it is a farm, it doesn't matter. What matters is what is your input cost and what is your output cost, right? Your output is purely dependent upon your cost of input. So the best management practice is least input and maximum output. That ensures the maximum profitability. The same goes true with the fishery industry as well. So what people are wanting to do by adding their feed or their medicine or anything for that matter is only increase the productivity. But they are increasing the productivity on cost of maximizing their input cost, whether it is agriculture, horticulture, or aquaculture. Every time they are putting in any kind of feed or medicine, they are actually increasing the input cost. So they are compromising on the profitability quotient. Now, it's not that they didn't know about it. They were very well aware of it, but they did not have any other option because there was a lot of research which was required to be done in terms of understanding the ecology. Because the way modern science has developed is a methodology of segregation. So if you get into physics, you forget chemistry. If you get into chemistry, you forget biology. Right? So that is how the holistic approach is missing. Now, the best practice, of course, is uh, that you get a natural production with the least amount of input cost. And why this is possible is because all this aquatic organism used to exist even before human beings started to coexist with them on this planet. So nature has got a provision for everything. You just got to understand nature so that you can build your development strategies in absolute harmony with the natural processes. Whereas we have been fighting with the nature so far. So the way it helps a fish farmer is fish farmer gets to understand the basic aqua ecology, and he starts the aquaculture in absolute harmony with the ecology instead of disturbing the ecology. Right? So when you're adding your factory feed into the water body, you are basically adding a lot of nutrients into the water body which are not required, right? Which will ultimately get settled as sludge. When you are adding, let's say, cow dung, what kind of cow dung are you adding? Are you adding manure or you're adding green? When you're adding, let's say, potassium permanganate to disinfect the fishes, is it actually required? So all these are basically increasing your input cost and affecting your economy. So I think we can discuss in more elaborate
Yeah.
way
Yes.
onto this into the next session because the time is getting
Yes, sir. Sure.
finished.
So,
And
yeah,
today's schedule was to understand water and ecology. Tomorrow, I think it is due for aquaculture specifically. Am I right, Kanna?
Yeah.
sure. Thank you, sir. I mean, I think
Okay.
Vidya can take it further because he has evolved a certain set of management practices, and he can probably get it vetted from you within that framework of doing everything right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Together we can function as a team and we can share each other's knowledge and we can take it forward for the
Sure.
benefit of the society.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
We are slightly overshot the time, but anyway, at the end of like today's session, I would like to thank Madhukarji like for giving and sparing his time, valuable time with us, and responding to all the queries like with patience. Really, thank you so much, Madhukarji. And I would like to thank all my colleagues for coming prepared, taking interest, sparing their time, sharing their questions and asking these questions, which also help others like and to learn from it. So today I would conclude the session here, but I would like to share, just let me give a prelude like for tomorrow's session. It would be mostly on aquaculture and entrepreneurship, but there is this particular interesting line what Manish Rajankarji, who is also working on aquatic habitat restoration, he always says, मछली पानी में नहीं रहती है, पानी उसका घर है. So fish doesn't live in water, but water is its home. And that's how he says, like, we should not consider fish as some commodity or it just like, lives in water, whatever. But we should see water as its home, and we should treat water like the way we treat our home, is what he always emphasizes. And with that thing, it would set a tone like for tomorrow's session. And I would invite all of you to please spare some of your time, join us tomorrow, and Madhukarji would be here like with us. And I look forward to another interesting session tomorrow on aquaculture and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for everyone, and have a very good week ahead. Thank you, Madhukarji. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
all my
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone
Thank
for
you,
joining
Madhukar
in.
sir. It's a really good session. We got more things, but really got but new things, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.